My name is Iain Bryson. I want to make a video to introduce myself and my story about my 3-year-old daughter who was abducted in 2010 by her mother's family, which is a cult practicing intergenerational ritual abuse. She just turned 16 on January 30th of this year. I haven't seen her since December 27th, 2010. I'm currently finishing a book about this entitled I Love You Like One. I also have a website, iloveyoulikeone.com, where you will find more information. I met my first wife, Agata Makowska, in 2004. She had come over to the United States with a group of Polish people on a J1 visa, which is a 3-month work travel visa. I was living in Norwich, Connecticut, just having finished my master's degree the year before at the University of Connecticut. She had come over with her boyfriend, but I didn't care about that. When I met her, I felt an instant bond, and she moved in with me shortly thereafter. We got engaged within a matter of weeks when she took a ring off her finger and told me to give it back to her and ask her to marry her. Early on, I knew that she was carrying some issues from her past, and I suspected some sort of trauma in her background. But I was committed. There was no turning back. I documented my conjectures in my journal, writing that it appeared to me that she had symptoms of a trauma-related disorder. At the time, many of her symptoms resembled borderline personality disorder. She had no memories of her childhood. She repeatedly assured me that the nicest thing her dad ever did for her was bring her 1 cup of tea. She experienced sexual dysfunction and frequently told me that she felt that there was something wrong with her. She threatened to cut herself with a knife, holding it across her wrist as she sat huddled in a corner in our kitchen. She had an intense and seemingly irrational fear of abandonment, unexplained debilitating migraine headaches, and mood personality swings that blew my mind. One moment it seemed like everything was perfect, the next the world was literally ending, and she had no ability to verbalize what was or could be going on with her. We returned to Poland together so that we could apply for a fiancé visa to the United States, so that we could return together and make our home there. It was here that I began to feel the dysfunction in her family. Her dad was a raging alcoholic, and her mom was the most unhappy person I had ever met. Their home was extremely strange, though I couldn't put my finger on exactly what was going on, and I chalked it all up to them being Polish. It was difficult to get a good read on what was going on because I didn't speak Polish yet. I could only understand Agata, and she was vague and cryptic, telling me very little about her father, only repetitive statements about the 1 cup of tea, or even stranger things like, my dad likes young boobies. Agata and I were married on July 2nd, 2005 in Montville, Connecticut. Our daughter, Adelle Avery Bryson, was born January 30th, 2007 in New London, Connecticut. In 2008, she convinced me to move to the Netherlands because she wanted to be closer to her family in Poland. As time went on, I became more certain that my wife had a traumatic childhood, though she wouldn't or couldn't talk about it. I don't remember, she would insist. And when I asked her what she did remember, she would say something like, I remember I was never married before. I got her to admit that something was obviously off, and to agree with me that many of her traits looked a lot like borderline personality disorder. She began counseling, though she never followed through, only going a few times. In 2010, Adele returned from my in-laws in Poland after Easter with signs that she had been abused. For about a week or so, she had an extreme fear that someone would touch her pee-pee, and panic attacks when it was time to shower. No, please, not my pee-pee, not my pee-pee, she begged. At the time, she made several comments about her grandfather's pee-pee and testicles. She had bruises on her body. She was now having nightmares and new behavioral issues. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't wrap my head around it. Agata and I decided to move our family back to the United States in July or August of 2010, and we began the necessary paperwork with the U.S. Department of State because she was unable to return to the United States without a new visa. I returned to Connecticut in September 2010, where I stayed until December looking for work and housing and preparing for our move. I sent my wife and daughter back to Poland for support while I was away. The three of us met back at our apartment in The Hague on December 8th, 2010. Less than 10 minutes after getting home, Agata told me that she hates me and has always hated me, that her family is a cult, and that she was taking our daughter back to Poland for Christmas or New Year's because of mind control. I told her that she had lost it, that whatever it was happening again. I reminded her the day before that she had emailed me and said that she couldn't wait to be home tomorrow, and that she loved me loads and loads, and that this had been the tone of our communication for the entire 3 months we were apart. And she told me that she didn't mean any of it, that this was part of a plan, reiterating she hates me and has always hated me. But that's impossible, Agata. We need to get help, I pled. At first, I wasn't 100% certain that this was my wife. She was so entirely different that I considered that she could be a twin I was unaware of. The difference between this person and the person I had left and communicated with daily for the previous 3 months was night and day, black and white, Jekyll and Hyde. I wanted to see her body so that I could make sure, but she now hated me, so that was impossible. Adele, once again, had signs and symptoms of an abused child. This time with deep bruising that she said was from Grandpa, more talk about his private parts, the same not my pee-pee terrors and panic attacks. The nightmares returned. She reverted to pooping and peeing in her pants in bed, and it appeared she was acquiring an eating disorder. I immediately sought help, and I proceeded to try to convince my wife to voluntarily seek help. No, you are wrong, she would assure me. I am taking our daughter back to Poland, and my dad has created a red herring. Your drug, psychological, and criminal histories will be used against you so that no one will believe you, and you will never see your daughter again. She refused to speak to the psychologist, was concerned and trying to reach her, and she refused to tell me where Adelle's passport was. I went to the local police department and told them that my wife was threatening to take our daughter out of the country, but they told me there was nothing they could do, that I should contact a lawyer. All of the signs were there. I even told Agata that I knew Adele had been abused when I was begging her to get help, but even in saying it, I couldn't fully realize it. I assumed that other men in her life were loving her the way I was, and I assumed that it would be impossible to intentionally hurt something so precious. And how could any of it be happening under my wife's watch? I thought I had things under control because at least they were back under our roof. Whatever had happened in Poland was over now, and I was confident that we could get back on track as we had after their previous visit to Poland. Soon, I reasoned to myself, my daughter won't have these issues anymore, and my wife will love me again, as it was the last time. I continued trying to convince Agata to get help, but she refused, only repeating over and over again about taking Adele back to Poland and the red herring. Over my dead body, I thought. On December 27th, Agata convinced me that she was going to take Adele to the library. I gave Adele a big hug and watched them go down the stairs. I called a good friend and I told him that it was happening again, that I didn't know what to do. Then all of a sudden it hit me. They were gone. I sprinted to the police station and told them to stop my daughter from being taken to Poland, but they dismissed my concerns and wouldn't even take a report. I returned several times to the police station over the next couple days, but they wouldn't help me. The U.S. Embassy told me that it was out of their jurisdiction and recommended that I re-abduct my daughter and get her to the embassy, where they assured me that she would be evaluated, but I never saw her again. I tried to get help for the next 3 months, but to no avail. I filed paperwork with the U.S. Secretary of State under the Hague Abduction Treaty to have my child returned to her home country for a court hearing, but they told me that it could take up to 2 years. I wasn't willing to wait 2 years. In April 2011, I decided that I couldn't wait any longer. I decided that I had to make the authorities look closer at this matter, and that to do so I would insert myself into the scene so as to make it impossible for them to not to hear me. I drove to Poland and assaulted my father-in-law on the street, knowing I would soon have a lawyer and an interpreter, believing that they would have to evaluate my daughter. I didn't think that the details would matter, and I thought that everything would be sorted out once the child abuse investigation finally happened. I considered killing him, but when it came down to it, I couldn't, and I didn't think it was necessary. I wasn't mad at him. I just wanted attention, and this was the only way I could think of to get it. Nothing else had worked. But the details did matter, and because I chased him with a hammer in my hand, I was charged with attempted murder. At my first court hearing, the judge made it obvious that he didn't care about my allegations, but the only thing on his agenda was the attempted murderer he had standing before him, me, and now I was facing 8 to 25 years. I sat in prison for nearly a year without seeing a lawyer, and then the public defender I did eventually see couldn't understand me because the interpreter spoke English so poorly. The U.S. Embassy refused to help me with the interpreter, and they refused to pursue having my daughter evaluated, telling me that she was considered to be a Polish citizen when she was in Poland because her mother was Polish, that it didn't matter that she was born in the USA. My belief that my daughter had been abused was diagnosed as a delusion due to the following. Nobody supported me in court, and therefore I stood all alone, so that even my family sided de facto with my daughter's abductors. There was no evidence of the abuse other than my daughter herself, and they refused to evaluate her, officially stating that they had ruled out the possibility of abuse by talking to the mother and other Polish family members. Nobody listened to my constant cry, "Please just evaluate my daughter." I asked the court the following question: if there was evidence of my daughter's abuse, would you still be calling me delusional? And they said no. But rather than evaluate the child, they sent me to a maximum security court psychiatric facility. I had just spent 19 months in a 23-hour per day lockdown in pretrial prison, and now I was being sent for treatment for forced medication. I stopped talking about my daughter's abuse, realizing that I had lost the current battle, and I pled my case. I don't have any symptoms of mental disorder, and I haven't in nearly 2 years. How can you forcibly drug me? Yes, the prison psychiatrist agreed. You don't have any symptoms of mental illness, but the court ordered you here for treatment, and it is my job to treat you. The treatment is medication. There's nobody here who doesn't have to take it. I found myself caught in a trap that would take me more than 2 years to escape. The Polish court psychiatric system is a 3-tier system: maximum security, medium security, and minimum security. And I was told that I would have to stay at each level for a minimum of 6 months and be forcibly medicated, even though I had no symptoms of mental illness. The medication was torturous for me, as if rubber cement was being poured into my brain to stop it from working. And so I taught myself how to avoid taking it by fooling the staff. This became my job, to fight for my mind and get out so that I could continue fighting for my daughter. I was released in June 2015 after being incarcerated for 50 months, and I returned to the world with one thing on my mind: get to my daughter. My experience with having my daughter taken by an abusive cult and seeing the depths of evil so up close and personal had also shown me the light, the only light who has an answer to that which I was up against. There was one who guaranteed an answer to prayer, one who said that all things were possible, and I took him up on his offer. I had turned down an offer I received in prison for someone who wanted to connect me with the Polish mafia so that they could handle my problem for me. I knew that if I was going to pray, believing, and expect results, that I would have to be all in, that I would have to worship him in spirit and truth. I know that some people will have trouble with the part of the story that has to do with God, but I ask you to bear with me. Before my daughter was taken from me, and before I had seen what I have seen, I too thought faith was a stupid, silly word, and I also think that most people who use it misuse it. What it came down to was this: I needed a supernatural solution, and he is the only one who offered it. Only his promises are guarantees. Man has done nothing for me or for my daughter. I returned to Connecticut and began writing, gardening, and taking care of our animals: chickens, ducks, goats, sheep, pigs, and donkeys. I sold some vegetables and eggs, but I wasn't interested in money or anything other than stopping the abuse of my daughter and getting her back from her abductors. My primary job, as I saw it, was to seek God, and so I spent most of my time reading my Bible and praying, sometimes with fasting. The scripture literally says, "He will fulfill the desire of those who fear him, that he also will hear their cry and save them." And so that was what I set my mind to doing. Believing with my head was not enough. I knew I had to believe with my heart and with everything that I am. I thought that I was going to be some sort of monk until Emily walked into my life in 2018. She heard my story and agreed that something had to be done, and we joined forces. We were married in April 2022, and together we are determined to stand against the darkness and to serve the one who can and will. We love you, Adelle Avery Bryson. We are finishing the book, which we will release with the option to buy or download for free. We also plan to have it translated into Polish eventually. I invite you to check out our website, iloveyoulikeone.com. Thank you.